Book 4, Chapter 9 of War and Peace, Volume 2, by Leo Tolstoy, translated by Elmer Maude. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Book 4, Chapter 9. The little princess lay supported by pillows, with a white cap on her head. The pains had just left her. Strands of her black hair lay round her inflamed and perspiring cheeks. Her charming rosy mouth with its downy lip was open, and she was smiling joyfully. Prince Andrew entered and paused facing her at the foot of the sofa on which she was lying. Her glittering eyes, filled with childlike fear and excitement, rested on him without changing their expression. "I love you all, and have done no harm to anyone. Why must I suffer so? Help me," her look seemed to say. She saw her husband, but did not realize the significance of his appearance before her now. Prince Andrew went round the sofa and kissed her forehead. "My darling," he said, a word he had never used to her before, "God is merciful." She looked at him inquiringly, and with childlike reproach. "I expected help from you, and I get none from you either," said her eyes. She was not surprised at his having come. She did not realize that he had come. His coming had nothing to do with her sufferings or with their relief. The pangs began again, and Mary Bogdanovna advised Prince Andrew to leave the room. The doctor entered. Prince Andrew went out and, meeting Princess Mary, again joined her. They began talking in whispers, but their talk broke off at every moment. They waited and listened. "Go, dear," said Princess Mary. Prince Andrew went again to his wife and sat waiting in the room next to hers. A woman came from the bedroom with a frightened face and became confused when she saw Prince Andrew. He covered his face with his hands and remained so for some minutes. Piteous, helpless, animal moans came through the door. Prince Andrew got up, went to the door, and tried to open it. Someone was holding it shut. "You can't come in! You can't!" said a terrified voice from within. He began pacing the room. The screaming ceased, and a few more seconds went by. Then, suddenly, a terrible shriek— it could not be hers, she could not scream like that— came from the bedroom. Prince Andrew ran to the door. The scream ceased, and he heard the wail of an infant. "What have they taken a baby in there for?" thought Prince Andrew in the first second. "A baby? What baby? Why is there a baby there? Or is the baby born?" Then suddenly he realized the joyful significance of that wail. Tears choked him, and leaning his elbows on the window-sill, he began to cry, sobbing like a child. The door opened. The doctor, with his shirt-sleeves tucked up, without a coat, pale and with a trembling jaw, came out of the room. Prince Andrew turned to him, but the doctor gave him a bewildered look and passed by without a word. A woman rushed out and, seeing Prince Andrew, stopped, hesitating on the threshold. He went into his wife's room. She was lying dead, in the same position he had seen her in 5 minutes before, and, despite the fixed eyes and the pallor of the cheeks, the same expression was on her charming childlike face, with its upper lip covered with tiny black hair. "I love you all, and have done no harm to anyone. And what have you done to me?" said her charming, pathetic, dead face. In a corner of the room, something red and tiny gave a grunt and squealed in Mary Bogdanovna's trembling white hands. 2 hours later, Prince Andrew, stepping softly, went into his father's room. The old man already knew everything. He was standing close to the door, and as soon as it opened, his rough old arms closed like a vice round his son's neck, and without a word he began to sob like a child. 3 days later, the little princess was buried, and Prince Andrew went up the steps to where the coffin stood to give her the farewell kiss. And there in the coffin was the same face, though with closed eyes. "Ah, what have you done to me?" it still seemed to say, and Prince Andrew felt that something gave way in his soul and that he was guilty of a sin he could neither remedy nor forget. He could not weep. The old man, too, came up and kissed the waxen little hands that lay quietly crossed one on the other on her breast, and to him, too, her face seemed to say, "Ah, what have you done to me, and why?" And at the sight the old man turned angrily away. Another 5 days passed, and then the young Prince Nicholas Andreevitch was baptized. The wet nurse supported the coverlet with her chin, while the priest with the goose-feather anointed the boy's little red and wrinkled soles and palms. His grandfather, who was his godfather, trembling and afraid of dropping him, carried the infant round the battered tin font and handed him over to the godmother, Princess Mary. Prince Andrew sat in another room, faint with fear lest the baby should be drowned in the font, and awaited the termination of the ceremony. He looked up joyfully at the baby when the nurse brought it to him, and nodded approval when she told him that the wax with the baby's hair had not sunk in the font, but had floated. End of Book 4, Chapter 9. Book 4, Chapter 10 of War and Peace, Volume 2, by Leo Tolstoy, translated by Elmer Maude. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Book 4, Chapter 10. Rostov's share in Dólokhov's duel with Bezúkhov was hushed up by the efforts of the old count, and instead of being degraded to the ranks as he expected, he was appointed an adjutant to the Governor-General of Moscow. As a result, he could not go to the country with the rest of the family, but was kept all summer in Moscow by his new duties. Dólokhov recovered, and Rostov became very friendly with him during his convalescence. Dólokhov lay ill at his mother's, who loved him passionately and tenderly, and old Mary Ivanovna, who had grown fond of Rostov for his friendship to her Fedya, often talked to him about her son. "Yes, Count," she would say, "he is too noble and pure-souled for our present depraved world. No one now loves virtue. It seems like a reproach to everyone. Now tell me, Count, was it right, was it honorable of Bezúkhov? And Fedya, with his noble spirit, loved him, and even now never says a word against him. Those pranks in Petersburg when they played some tricks on a policeman, didn't they do it together? And there, Bezúkhov got off scot-free, while Fedya had to bear the whole burden on his shoulders. Fancy what he had to go through. It's true he has been reinstated, but how could they fail to do that? I think there were not many such gallant sons of the fatherland out there as he. And now, this duel. Have these people no feeling or honor? Knowing him to be an only son, to challenge him and shoot so straight? It's well God had mercy on us. And what was it for? Who doesn't have intrigues nowadays? Why, if he was so jealous, as I see things, he should have shown it sooner, but he lets it go on for months. And then to call him out, reckoning on Fedya not fighting because he owed him money. What baseness! What meanness! I know you understand Fedya, my dear Count. That, believe me, is why I am so fond of you. Few people do understand him. He is such a lofty, heavenly soul." Dólokhov himself, during his convalescence, spoke to Rostov in a way no one would have expected of him. "I know people consider me a bad man," he said. "Let them. I don't care a straw about anyone but those I love. But those I love so that I would give my life for them, and the others I'd throttle if they stood in my way. I have an adored, a priceless mother, and 2 or 3 friends, you among them. And as for the rest, I only care about them in so far as they are harmful or useful. And most of them are harmful, especially the women. Yes, dear boy," he continued, "I have met loving, noble, high-minded men, but I have not yet met any women, countesses or cooks, who are not venal. I have not yet met that divine purity and devotion I look for in women. If I found such a one, I'd give my life for her. But those—" and he made a gesture of contempt. "And believe me, if I still value my life, it is only because I still hope to meet such a divine creature, who will regenerate, purify, and elevate me. But you don't understand it." "Oh yes, I quite understand," answered Rostov, who was under his new friend's influence. In the autumn the Rostovs returned to Moscow. Early in the winter Denisov also came back and stayed with them. The first half of the winter of 1806, which Nicholas Rostov spent in Moscow, was one of the happiest, merriest times for him and the whole family. Nicholas brought many young men to his parents' house. Vera was a handsome girl of 20, Sonia a girl of 16, with all the charm of an opening flower. Natasha, half grown up and half child, was now childishly amusing, now girlishly enchanting. At that time in the Rostovs' house there prevailed an amorous atmosphere characteristic of homes where there are very young and very charming girls. Every young man who came to the house, seeing those impressionable, smiling young faces, smiling probably at their own happiness, feeling the eager bustle around him, and hearing the fitful bursts of song and music and the inconsequent but friendly prattle of young girls ready for anything and full of hope, experienced the same feeling, sharing with the young folk of the Rostovs' household a readiness to fall in love and an expectation of happiness. Among the young men introduced by Rostov, one of the first was Dólokhov, whom every one in the house liked except Natasha. She almost quarreled with her brother about him. She insisted that he was a bad man, and that in the duel with Bezúkhov, Pierre was right and Dólokhov wrong, and further, that he was disagreeable and unnatural. "There's nothing for me to understand," she cried out with resolute self-will. "He is wicked and heartless. There now, I like your Denisov, though he is a rake and all that, still I like him. So you see, I do understand. I don't know how to put it. With this one, everything is calculated, and I don't like that. But Denisov—" "Oh, Denisov is quite different," replied Nicholas, implying that even Denisov was nothing compared to Dólokhov. "You must understand what a soul there is in Dólokhov. You should see him with his mother. What a heart!" "Well, I don't know about that, but I am uncomfortable with him. And do you know he has fallen in love with Sonia?" "What nonsense!" "I'm certain of it. You'll see." Natasha's prediction proved true. Dólokhov, who did not usually care for the society of ladies, began to come often to the house, and the question for whose sake he came, though no one spoke of it, was soon settled. He came because of Sonia, and Sonia, though she would never have dared to say so, knew it and blushed scarlet every time Dólokhov appeared. Dólokhov often dined at the Rostovs, never missed a performance at which they were present, and went to Iogol's balls for young people which the Rostovs always attended. He was pointedly attentive to Sonia and looked at her in such a way that not only could she not bear his glances without coloring, but even the old Countess and Natasha blushed when they saw his looks. It was evident that this strange, strong man was under the irresistible influence of the dark, graceful girl who loved another. Rostov noticed something new in Dólokhov's relations with Sonia, but he did not explain to himself what these new relations were. "They're always in love with someone," he thought of Sonia and Natasha. But he was not as much at ease with Sonia and Dólokhov as before, and was less frequently at home. In the autumn of 1806, everybody had again begun talking of the war with Napoleon with even greater warmth than the year before. Orders were given to raise recruits, 10 men in every 1,000 for the regular army, and besides this, 9 men in every 1,000 for the militia. Everywhere Bonaparte was anathematized, and in Moscow nothing but the coming war was talked of. For the Rostov family, the whole interest of these preparations for war lay in the fact that Nicholas would not hear of remaining in Moscow, and only awaited the termination of Denisov's furlough after Christmas to return with him to their regiment. His approaching departure did not prevent his amusing himself, but rather gave zest to his pleasures. He spent the greater part of this time away from home, at dinners, parties, and balls. End of Book 4, Chapter 10. Book 4, Chapter 11 of War and Peace, Volume 2, by Leo Tolstoy, translated by Elmer Maude. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Book 4, Chapter 11. On the third day after Christmas, Nicholas dined at home, a thing he had rarely done of late. It was a grand farewell dinner, as he and Denisov were leaving to join the regiment after Epiphany. About 20 people were present, including Dólokhov and Denisov. Never had love been so much in the air, and never had the amorous atmosphere made itself so strongly felt in the Rostovs' house as at this holiday time. Seize the moments of happiness, love and be loved. That is the only reality in the world. All else is folly. It is the one thing we are interested in here, said the spirit of the place. Nicholas, having as usual exhausted 2 pairs of horses, without visiting all the places he meant to go to and where he had been invited, returned home just before dinner. As soon as he entered the house, he noticed and felt the tension of the amorous air in the house, and also noticed a curious embarrassment among some of those present. Sonia, Dólokhov, and the old countess were especially disturbed, and to a lesser degree Natasha. Nicholas understood that something must have happened between Sonia and Dólokhov before dinner, and with the kindly sensitiveness natural to him, was very gentle and wary with them both at dinner. At the same evening there was to be one of the balls that Iogel, the dancing master, gave for his pupils during the holidays. "Nicholas, will you come to Iogel's? Please do," said Natasha. "He asked you, and Vasily Dmitritch Denisov is also going." "Where would I not go at the Countess' command?" said Denisov, who at the Rostovs had jocularly assumed the role of Natasha's knight. "I'm even ready to dance the pas de châle." "If I have time," answered Nicholas, "but I promised the Arkarovs. They have a party." "And you?" he asked Dólokhov, but as soon as he had asked the question, he noticed that it should not have been put. "Perhaps," coldly and angrily replied Dólokhov, glancing at Sonia, and scowling he gave Nicholas just such a look as he had given Pierre at the club dinner. There is something up, thought Nicholas, and he was further confirmed in this conclusion by the fact that Dólokhov left immediately after dinner. He called Natasha and asked her what was the matter. "And I was looking for you," said Natasha, running out to him. "I told you, but you would not believe it," she said triumphantly. "He has proposed to Sonia." Little as Nicholas had occupied himself with Sonia of late, something seemed to give way within him at this news. Dólokhov was a suitable and in some respects a brilliant match for the dowerless orphan girl. From the point of view of the old countess and of society, it was out of the question for her to refuse him. And therefore Nicholas' first feeling on hearing the news was one of anger with Sonia. He tried to say, "That's capital. Of course she'll forget her childish promises and accept the offer." But before he had time to say it, Natasha began again. "And fancy, she refused him quite definitely," adding, after a pause, "she told him she loved another." "Yes, my Sonia could not have done otherwise," thought Nicholas. "Much as Mamma pressed her, she refused, and I know she won't change once she has said." "And Mamma pressed her," said Nicholas reproachfully. "Yes," said Natasha. "Do you know, Nicholas, don't be angry, but I know you will not marry her. I know, heaven knows how, but I know for certain that you won't marry her." "Now, you don't know that at all," said Nicholas. "But I must talk to her. What a darling Sonia is," he added with a smile. "Ah, she is indeed a darling. I'll send her to you." And Natasha kissed her brother and ran away. A minute later Sonia came in with a frightened, guilty, and scared look. Nicholas went up to her and kissed her hand. This was the first time since his return that they had talked alone and about their love. "Sophie," he began, timidly at first, and then more and more boldly, "if you wish to refuse one who is not only a brilliant and advantageous match, but a splendid, noble fellow, he is my friend—" Sonia interrupted him. "I have already refused," she said hurriedly. "If you are refusing for my sake, I am afraid that I—" Sonia again interrupted. She gave him an imploring, frightened look. "Nicholas, don't tell me that," she said. "No, but I must. It may be arrogant of me, but still it is best to say it. If you refuse him on my account, I must tell you the whole truth. I love you, and I think I love you more than anyone else. That is enough for me," said Sonia, blushing. "No, but I have been in love 1,000 times, and shall fall in love again, though for no one have I such a feeling of friendship, confidence, and love as I have for you. Then I am young. Mamma does not wish it. In a word, I make no promise, and I beg you to consider Dólokhov's offer," he said, articulating his friend's name with difficulty. "Don't say that to me. I want nothing. I love you as a brother, and always shall, and I want nothing more." "You are an angel. I am not worthy of you, but I am afraid of misleading you." And Nicholas again kissed her hand. End of Book 4, Chapter 11.